The sleek conference room of Carter Enterprises gleamed under the bright white lights, its polished glass walls reflecting the towering skyline of New York City. A long, dark mahogany table dominated the center, surrounded by high-backed leather chairs that spoke of both luxury and authority. Employees shuffled into the room, their expressions a mix of anticipation and trepidation. At the head of the table sat Jonathan Carter, the company's powerful CEO, his presence both commanding and intimidating. Dressed in a tailored suit that accentuated his tall, athletic frame, he exuded an air of confidence that left little room for dissent. Emily Dawson stood at the entrance, her hand resting gently on her rounded belly, a gesture that had become instinctual over the past few weeks. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the meeting ahead. It had been a challenging few months, and as a single mother-to-be, the pressure weighed heavily on her. With her heart racing, she stepped inside, her gaze immediately locking onto Jonathan's piercing blue eyes. They narrowed as he assessed her, an unsettling smile creeping across his lips. "Ah, Emily," Jonathan drawled, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I see you've decided to grace us with your presence. How considerate of you." The room fell silent, and Emily felt heat rush to her cheeks. She forced a smile, hoping to brush off the humiliation. "I'm sorry for being late. Late?" he interrupted, leaning forward slightly, his expression now one of mock concern. "I didn't realize a little pregnancy could slow you down so much. I suppose that's what happens when you're carrying around extra weight." A ripple of discomfort passed through her colleagues, their eyes darting between Emily and Jonathan. She could feel the tension hanging in the air like a thick fog. Emily's heart sank further as she took her seat, determined to focus on her presentation despite the sting of his words. She opened her laptop, her fingers trembling slightly as she navigated to her slides. "Let's hear what our brilliant Emily has prepared for us today," Jonathan said, his tone dripping with condescension. "I can hardly wait to be dazzled." Emily cleared her throat, pushing back the waves of embarrassment that threatened to overtake her. "Thank you, Jonathan. Today, I'll be presenting our market analysis for the upcoming quarter. As you all know, we've identified some key areas for potential growth." "Growth?" Jonathan interrupted again, his voice rising. "Or are we just hoping for a miracle? Tell us, what exactly do you think makes your ideas so special? Because from where I'm sitting, they look like wishful thinking." Her colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact. Emily's heart raced as she tried to maintain her composure. "I believe that with the right strategy, we can significantly increase our market share." "Right strategy?" Jonathan scoffed, his tone dripping with mockery. "You mean the same strategy you've been proposing for the last few months? I'm beginning to think you might be putting in too much time watching those parenting shows instead of focusing on actual business." Emily's cheeks burned with humiliation. She swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "I assure you, I have put a lot of thought into this presentation. If you could just let me finish. Why bother?" he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Let's just skip to the part where we all agree this is a waste of time. After all, you've got a baby to think about, don't you?" The laughter that erupted from some of her colleagues felt like daggers to her heart. She blinked back tears, her resolve faltering. With every word, Jonathan was stripping away her confidence, leaving her feeling exposed and vulnerable in front of the very people she had always worked hard to impress. As the meeting dragged on, Emily struggled to focus, her mind racing with thoughts of her future. Each joke, each sarcastic remark from Jonathan felt like a warning bell, echoing her fear of losing her job as a single mother. She had always prided herself on her professionalism and dedication, yet here she was, reduced to a target of ridicule. Finally, the meeting concluded, and the room emptied, leaving Emily to gather her things in silence. She felt the weight of her colleagues' glances burn into her back as they exited, their eyes filled with pity. As she turned to leave, Jonathan's voice called out to her once more. "Emily, I expect you to come back with something more substantial next time. Maybe even consider how your personal life is affecting your work." The door clicked shut behind her, and Emily leaned against the wall, struggling to catch her breath. She felt her chest tightening, and the tears she had fought so hard to suppress began to spill over. Just then, she spotted Sarah, her best friend and confidante, approaching with a concerned look etched across her face. "Emily," Sarah said softly, her eyes scanning the room as if to ensure they were alone. "Are you okay?" "No," Emily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was terrible. I don't know how much longer I can take this. Let's go somewhere private," Sarah suggested, leading her toward the break room. Once inside, Sarah closed the door and turned to Emily, her face serious. "Tell me everything." Emily sank into a chair, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I try so hard to prove myself, but he makes it impossible. I'm scared, Sarah. Scared of losing my job, scared of being a single mom, and scared of how he treats me." Sarah's expression softened, her brow furrowing with empathy. "You deserve better than this, Emily. You're talented, and you've worked so hard. Don't let him get to you." "I know," Emily sighed, "but it's hard when he's the CEO. He has all the power, and I feel so small." "Maybe it's time to stand up for yourself," Sarah encouraged, her voice gaining strength. "You have every right to be here, and you're carrying a child. That makes you stronger than he could ever understand." Emily looked at Sarah, the flicker of determination igniting within her. "You're right. I need to find my voice. I won't let him push me around anymore." "Good," Sarah said, a smile breaking through her concern. "You're going to be an amazing mother, and you deserve to feel respected at work. Let's work on your next presentation together. You'll show him what you're made of." As they talked, Emily felt a renewed sense of hope. Despite the challenges ahead, she knew she had support, and she was determined to fight for her place in the corporate world while preparing for motherhood. Little did she know, the complex web of her past and her future was about to unravel in ways she could never have imagined. As the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, Emily Dawson sat at her desk, staring blankly at her computer screen. The hum of corporate life surrounded her, yet she felt isolated, trapped in a world that seemed to have forgotten her. The whispers in the office had grown louder since the meeting with Jonathan Carter, the CEO of Carter Enterprises. Rumors about her pregnancy and her perceived incompetence circulated like wildfire, and she could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. "Hey, Emily," Sarah called from across the room, breaking her reverie. She approached with a concerned expression. "You okay? You've been awfully quiet today." Emily forced a smile, but it faltered. "Yeah, just thinking." Sarah leaned against the edge of Emily's desk, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I heard some people talking. They think you're not cut out for this job anymore, that it's too much with everything going on." The words stung, but Emily had grown accustomed to the sharpness of judgment. "I'll be fine. I just need to focus," she replied, though her heart sank at the thought of her colleagues' opinions. "Listen," Sarah said, her tone shifting to one of genuine concern. "You can't let Jonathan get to you like this. You're smart, capable. You deserve respect, especially now." Emily nodded, appreciating her friend's support, but feeling the reality of her situation weigh heavy. She was a single mother-to-be in a high-pressure corporate environment, and every day felt like a battle against her circumstances. Later that afternoon, as Emily made her way to the break room to refill her coffee, she overheard a group of executives laughing, their voices tinged with mockery. "Did you see Emily's face during the meeting? Priceless," one of them snorted, and the others joined in the laughter. Her stomach churned, and she quickly turned away, her heart pounding as she tried to escape the scene. She felt exposed, like a target, and the laughter followed her down the hallway, a haunting reminder of her vulnerability. As she returned to her desk, Emily's gaze fell on a framed photograph tucked in the corner, a picture of her mother and her at a charity event years ago. The memory flooded back, a time when she felt carefree and cherished. Her mother had a way of making everything seem possible, filling Emily with hope and ambition. But now, with the baby on the way and Jonathan's cruel behavior looming over her, that hope felt distant. That evening, Seeking distraction, Emily rifled through some old boxes in her apartment, remnants of her past. In one dusty box, she stumbled upon an envelope filled with old photographs. As she flipped through them, she came across one that made her heart stop. It was a picture of Jonathan at a charity event, laughing with her late mother. They stood close, their smiles bright and genuine, a stark contrast to the tension that now filled Emily's life. "What the hell?" she muttered aloud, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. The connection was undeniable. Jonathan had known her mother. But why hadn't she ever learned about this before? Confusion wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. Was Jonathan's cruelty a reflection of their shared past? Did he know who she was? The revelation sent her spiraling into thought. Days passed and the annual corporate party approached. Emily dreaded the thought of facing Jonathan in a social setting, but she also knew this was her chance to confront him. She practiced her words in front of the mirror, rehearsing the strength she wanted to project. "You need to stand up for yourself," she whispered, though doubts gnawed at her confidence. The night of the party arrived, and the grand ballroom was alive with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. Employees mingled, their attire sleek and polished. Emily wore a simple but elegant dress that hugged her baby bump, feeling both beautiful and vulnerable. She took a deep breath, scanning the room for Jonathan, her heart racing at the prospect of their encounter. As she spotted him across the room, she felt a mix of anger and trepidation. Jonathan was surrounded by a group of executives, his charisma radiating as he engaged in conversation. But just as she prepared to approach him, she overheard snippets of their discussion. "Did you hear about the financial discrepancies in the last quarter?" "It's a mess," one executive said, concern etched on his face. Jonathan's expression darkened. "I'll handle it. Just keep it under wraps for now. We can't afford any more bad press." Emily's heart raced. What financial discrepancies? Why hadn't she heard about this? The mention of a scandal sent her thoughts spiraling. She was already dealing with the weight of her pregnancy and Jonathan's attitude. Now it seemed there was a bigger issue looming over the company. Gathering her courage, Emily took a step forward, only to hesitate as a wave of doubt washed over her. What if confronting him only made things worse? Would he retaliate? But the thought of remaining silent, of allowing him to continue his cruel behavior, was unbearable. As she opened her mouth to speak, Jonathan turned sharply, his gaze locking onto hers. Their eyes met, and in that instant, the noise of the party faded into the background. "Emily," he said, his tone shifting from casual to cold. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Neither did I," she replied, her voice steady despite the tumult within her. "I wanted to talk to you about the meeting." "Not now, Emily. This isn't the place," he said dismissively, glancing over her shoulder as if searching for an escape. "No, Jonathan, it is time," she pressed, her heart pounding. "You've treated me poorly, and I deserve to know why." His expression hardened, and for a moment she thought he might walk away. But something in her gaze held him there, rooted. "Fine," he said, his voice low and tense. "Let's talk. But not here." Before she could respond, he turned and walked toward a quieter part of the ballroom. Emily Dawson sat in the sterile, brightly lit examination room, the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead doing little to ease her nerves. The doctor, a kind-faced woman in her 40s named Dr. Harper, was going through the usual routine of checking her vitals with a practiced efficiency. Emily could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders, especially now that she was alone in this moment, her pregnancy making her acutely aware of every little detail and every possible outcome. "Everything looks good so far, Emily," Dr. Harper said, her eyes meeting Emily's with warmth. "But I wanted to talk to you about the genetic testing we discussed last time." Emily's stomach nodded. Genetic testing, the very word sent a chill through her. She had heard of the potential issues, the risks involved, and the uncertainties they brought. "Is there something wrong?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Harper hesitated, her expression shifting slightly as she took a seat across from Emily. "There's nothing alarming, but I think it's important to discuss the results and what they mean for you and your baby." Emily's heart raced. "What do you mean?" she pressed, unable to hide the tremor in her voice. "We found a genetic marker that could indicate certain conditions," Dr. Harper began gently. "It's not definitive, and many babies with this marker go on to be perfectly healthy. But it does warrant further monitoring. I recommend additional testing to get a clearer picture." The doctor's words washed over Emily, each phrase heavy with implications. She felt the walls closing in around her, a suffocating sense of dread settling in her chest. "What kind of conditions?" she asked, the words escaping her lips before she could stop them. "Some can be related to developmental delays. Others can be more serious. The next test can help us understand more about what we're dealing with," Dr. Harper explained, her tone calm and reassuring. "I know this can be overwhelming." Emily nodded, but inside she was spiraling. The thought of her baby facing challenges she might not be equipped to handle, left her feeling powerless. What if the baby needs special care?" she stammered, her eyes welling with tears. "I can't even think about that right now." Dr. Harper reached across the table, placing a comforting hand over Emily's. "You're not alone in this. We can work together to create a plan. And remember, there are many resources available for new parents, especially those facing unexpected circumstances." Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Thank you, Dr. Harper. I don't know if I can handle more uncertainty." As she left the clinic, the world outside felt more daunting than ever. The bustling streets of New York City seemed to blur into a haze of uncertainty, each honk of a car horn echoing the turmoil in her mind. She needed to talk to someone, but who could she trust with such heavy news? As she walked, she couldn't shake the image of Jonathan Carter's face from her mind, the man who had been so cruel to her, yet had somehow woven into the fabric of her life in ways she hadn't yet understood. Back at the office, the atmosphere was tense. Emily walked through the sleek corridors of Carter Enterprises, her heart pounding, not only from the weight of her news, but also from the growing tension she sensed in the air. The stock prices had been declining, and she could see it reflected in the faces of her colleagues. Whispers and furtive glances seemed to follow her as she made her way to her desk. As she settled in, she caught a glimpse of Jonathan through the glass walls of his office. He was pacing, a furrow etched deep into his brow. It was an unusual sight. Jonathan, the powerful CEO, appeared vulnerable. Emily felt a flicker of empathy stir within her. Despite everything, she couldn't help but recognize the burden he carried. Perhaps he was struggling with more than just the company's financial troubles. "Hey, Emily," Sarah called out, breaking her train of thought. She approached with a concerned expression. "You're looking a bit pale. Everything okay?" Emily forced a smile, not wanting to burden her friend with her worries. "I just came from my prenatal appointment," she said, her voice steady. "Everything's fine, just routine stuff." Sarah didn't look convinced. "You sure? You can talk to me about anything, you know that." "Yeah, I know," Emily replied, grateful for her friend's support. "I just have a lot on my mind. You know how it is." As the day wore on, Emily found herself increasingly distracted by the weight of her situation. She was about to head to the break room for a much-needed cup of coffee when she overheard snippets of a conversation drifting from Jonathan's office. Curiosity piqued. She paused, straining to hear more. "I don't care what it takes. We need to stabilize the stock prices." Jonathan's voice was sharp, the edge of desperation evident. "If we don't act fast, we're going to lose everything," another voice chimed in, one Emily recognized as Mark, the CFO. "We need to consider the long-term implications, Jonathan. This isn't just a short-term fix." The tension in Jonathan's voice escalated. "I'm not interested in long-term implications when we're on the brink of disaster." There was a pause, and Emily could almost feel the heat radiating from his frustration. "I need results, and I need them now." Emily's heart raced. She had always seen Jonathan as a tyrant, but now, hearing his raw desperation, she felt a strange sense of connection. He was just a man, grappling with the weight of his decisions. She wondered if perhaps they weren't so different, both of them facing overwhelming futures, albeit in different ways. The thought lingered as she returned to her desk, her coffee forgotten. She couldn't shake the feeling that the chaos around them was a reflection of their intertwined fates. And as she delved deeper into her family's past, the nagging question of her connection to Jonathan loomed larger than ever. There had to be some link, some reason for the strange pull she felt toward him. Emily's resolve began to solidify. She would confront Jonathan about his treatment of her, but first, she needed to understand the full scope of their connection. Emily Dawson stood outside the imposing glass doors of Jonathan Carter's office, her heart racing. The sleek, modern design of the office building reflected the cold corporate world where she felt increasingly trapped. Today would be different. She had resolved to confront Jonathan about the secrets lurking in their past. The photo she had discovered of him with her late mother weighed heavily on her mind, intertwining their lives in ways she had never anticipated. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. Jonathan sat behind his grand mahogany desk, the city skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. He appeared engrossed in a pile of documents, his brow furrowed in concentration. For a moment, Emily hesitated, her resolve faltering under the weight of his presence. But as she remembered the humiliation he had heaped upon her during meetings, her determination surged back. "Jonathan," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face before quickly morphing into a guarded expression. "Emily, what brings you here? I need to talk to you. It's important." She crossed the room, each step echoing her resolve. "Can it wait? I'm busy." His dismissal was sharp, but she pressed on. "No, it can't. Not anymore." She took a seat across from him, her heart pounding in her chest. "We need to discuss your relationship with my mother." Jonathan's expression shifted, the guarded facade cracking just slightly. "Your mother? What do you mean?" Emily leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I found a photo of you two together at a charity event. You were close. I deserve to know how this affects my life now, especially with everything that's happening." He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture that betrayed his discomfort. "Emily, just don't. You owe me honesty," she interrupted, her voice rising. "You ridiculed me in front of the entire team. You've made me feel like a burden. I deserve to understand why." Jonathan's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, she thought he might dismiss her once more. But instead, he leaned back in his chair, visibly weighing his options. "Your mother and I had a complicated relationship. She was a remarkable woman, but I was young and foolish. I didn't know how to handle it." "A complicated relationship?" Emily echoed, disbelief coloring her tone. "You mean you didn't care enough to commit?" His gaze intensified, and she could see flickers of pain in his expression. "It's not that simple. I cared for her deeply, but I was scared. I lost her, and I've been haunted by that choice ever since." Emily's heart twisted at his admission. Here was the man who had belittled her, now revealing a vulnerability she had never expected. "So you were afraid then, just like you are now." He flinched at her accusation. "This isn't about me, Emily. It's about you and the decisions you're making. You're pregnant, and you think that gives you the right to treat me like I am less than human." She shot back. "I'm trying to make a life for my child, and your actions make it impossible. Look, I get it. I've made mistakes," he replied, his voice dropping to a softer tone. "But you don't understand the pressure I'm under. The company is facing challenges, and I can't afford distractions. Not now." "Excuses," she spat, her frustration boiling over. "You're hiding behind your work like it's a shield. This isn't just about you or the company. It's about the child I'm carrying, our child. You're going to have to face the consequences of your choices, just like I am." Jonathan's expression hardened, but Emily could see the flicker of fear in his eyes. "What do you want me to do? I can't change the past." "No, you can't," she conceded, her voice trembling with emotion. "But you can be honest about it. You can acknowledge that your actions have consequences. Not just for you, but for me and this baby, A heavy silence filled the room, punctuated only by the distant sounds of the bustling city outside. Jonathan's eyes searched hers, and for a moment she thought he might finally understand. "Emily, he began, but she cut him off. "I need space. I need to think," she said, rising from her chair. "I can't do this right now." As she turned to leave, Jonathan's voice stopped her in her tracks. "I did care for your mother, Emily. I wish I had done things differently." She paused, looking over her shoulder at him, her heart heavy. "Caring isn't enough if you don't act on it. I hope you remember that." The door closed behind her with a soft click, but the weight of the conversation lingered in the air. Emily's mind raced as she walked down the sleek hallways of Carter Enterprises, each step echoing her turmoil. That night, as she lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling, lost in thought. The city lights filtered through her window, casting shadows that danced across the walls. She thought of her baby, the tiny life growing inside her, and the challenges that lay ahead. Would she be able to raise this child alone? Would she have to navigate the complexities of her relationship with Jonathan while building a future for her baby? She turned on her side, clutching her pillow tightly. "I will protect you," she whispered to her unborn child. No matter what it takes. The resolve washed over her like a wave, and she knew she had to find strength within herself. She could not let Jonathan's past mistakes define her future or that of her child. The world around her felt chaotic, but within her, a quiet determination began to blossom. As she drifted into a restless sleep, visions of her mother filled her dreams. Warm smiles, gentle laughter, and words of encouragement echoing in her mind. Emily awoke with a start, the memories igniting a fire within her. She would honor her mother's legacy, not by dwelling on the pain of the past, but by forging a path forward for herself and her child. Tomorrow would be another day, and she would face it with newfound strength, ready to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow across the bustling New York City skyline, Emily Dawson sat at her desk, her mind racing with thoughts of impending motherhood and the challenges she faced at Carter Enterprises. With her maternity leave fast approaching, she found herself torn between excitement for her new chapter and the lingering apprehension surrounding her tumultuous relationship with Jonathan Carter. The executive office was unusually quiet that afternoon. Colleagues had trickled out for the day, leaving Emily to sift through the final preparations for her leave. She glanced at her reflection in the glass window, noting the subtle changes in her appearance. The pregnancy had made her glow, but the stress from the office had also etched faint lines of worry across her brow. Emily took a deep breath and focused on her tasks. Just then, Jonathan entered the office, his footsteps echoing in the stillness. He looked different, less composed, as if the weight of his responsibilities had suddenly become too much to bear. Emily's heart raced at the sight of him, a mix of trepidation and curiosity swirling within her. "Emily," he said, his voice low and uncharacteristically soft. "Can we talk?" She hesitated for a moment, recalling the last encounter they'd had, the storm of emotions that had erupted between them. "Sure," she replied carefully, her hands clasped tightly on the desk. "What's on your mind?" Jonathan shifted uneasily, running a hand through his neatly combed hair. "I wanted to apologize for how I treated you in the past. I've been reflecting on my behavior, and I realize now how unfair I was." Emily felt a flicker of hope but tempered it with caution. "Apologies don't change what happened, Jonathan. You made it clear how you felt about me and my work." He sighed, visibly struggling to find the right words. "I know. I was under pressure, and I took it out on you, but I'm trying to make amends. I'd like to offer you the chance to lead a new project, something that could really showcase your talents." "What's the catch?" she asked, skepticism lacing her tone. "No catch," he insisted, meeting her gaze with an intensity that made her heart flutter. "I need someone with your insight for this initiative. It could also secure your position here while you're on leave." Emily's mind raced. This was unexpected. She had been preparing herself for the worst, a dismissal or a cold shoulder. Instead, he was proposing collaboration. "What's the project about?" she inquired, her professional instincts kicking in. "It's a sustainability initiative we're launching next quarter. I want you to help shape it. Your experience with the last campaign was impressive, and I think you could bring a fresh perspective." As he spoke, she felt the tension between them begin to dissipate. "I'll consider it," she said cautiously, her voice steady. "But I need to know that this isn't just a way to ease your conscience. I need to feel respected and valued." "Of course," Jonathan replied, his tone earnest. "I want to rebuild our working relationship. You deserve that." Before she could respond, he glanced at his watch and frowned. "I have a meeting to prepare for, but let's discuss the details tomorrow. I'll send over the preliminary plans tonight." As he turned to leave, Emily felt a mix of emotions. Perhaps there was a chance for a fresh start. Yet, lingering doubts haunted her. Did Jonathan truly want to change? Or was this merely a facade to distract from the chaos that swirled around him? Later that evening, Emily settled into her small apartment, her mind still racing with thoughts of the day. She poured herself a cup of herbal tea and sank into the cushions of her couch, her belly round and heavy with the life she was carrying. She pulled out her laptop, eager to review the project Jonathan had mentioned. As she sifted through the documents, she couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play. While Jonathan's apology seemed genuine, she knew the complexities of human emotions could not be easily unraveled. She started to draft notes for their meeting, her thoughts drifting back to their earlier exchanges, the tension that had once defined their interactions. The next morning, she arrived at the office early, the scent of fresh coffee wafting through the air. Emily settled into her workspace, her heart racing with a blend of anticipation and anxiety. The clock ticked away the minutes, and she found herself glancing at the door, waiting for Jonathan's arrival. When he entered, he carried a stack of papers and a smile that seemed to reach his eyes. "Morning, Emily. Ready to get started?" "Let's do this," she replied, her voice steady, masking the whirlwind of emotions inside her. They moved to the conference room, where Jonathan laid out the initial project plan. As they discussed ideas, Emily began to feel a sense of camaraderie between them, a spark of collaboration that had been absent before. "Your insights on the marketing strategy are brilliant," Jonathan said, leaning over the table, his enthusiasm palpable. "We could really make a difference with this initiative." Emily felt a rush of pride, a reminder of why she loved her job. "Thank you. But we need to ensure that the sustainability measures are realistic. We can't just make empty promises." "Agreed," Jonathan said, nodding emphatically. "I'll make sure the budget aligns with your recommendations." As they delved deeper into the project, Emily felt a sense of purpose return to her. She could see the potential for real impact, and for the first time in a while, she felt hopeful about her future. The office buzzed with the usual sounds of clacking keyboards and hushed conversations, but her mind was elsewhere, focused on the impending confrontation with Jonathan Carter. In her hands, she held a folder filled with evidence of the financial discrepancies she had uncovered, each page a testament to the perilous situation the company faced. As she flipped through the documents, her phone buzzed, an incoming call from her doctor. "Emily, can you come in for an urgent meeting? It's about your genetic testing results." The doctor's voice came through, steady but laced with an urgency that sent a chill down Emily's spine. "Is everything okay?" she managed to ask, her heart racing. "It's best if we discuss this in person. Can you come in this afternoon?" "Yeah, of course. I'll be there," she replied, her mind racing. What could be so urgent about the results? With a deep breath, she hung up and glanced at the clock. There was no time to waste. She needed to confront Jonathan, but the looming appointment weighed heavily on her. Gathering her courage, Emily stood up and straightened her blouse. She could already envision Jonathan's sleek office, the way he would lean back in his chair, that confident smirk on his face, as if he held all the cards. But today, she had the evidence he needed to hear. She made her way through the office, her heart pounding with each step. As she approached Jonathan's office, she paused, taking a moment to compose herself. She could hear his voice, deep and commanding, speaking with another executive. The door was slightly ajar, and she caught snippets of their conversation, enough to pique her curiosity. "We can't let this leak out. If the board finds out about the discrepancies, it's not just my reputation at stake," Jonathan said, his tone tense. "Agreed. We need to find a way to bury this," the executive replied. Emily's stomach twisted. What were they hiding? She leaned closer, intent on hearing more, but just then, Jonathan's voice dropped to a whisper, and she couldn't make out what he said next. Deciding it was better to confront him now rather than later, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. Jonathan looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Emily, I didn't expect to see you," he said, his voice smooth but guarded. "Jonathan, we need to talk," she stated firmly, holding the folder tightly against her chest. He gestured for her to sit. "Is this about the project we discussed? I thought we were on the same page." "It's about something more serious," she replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I've found some irregularities in the financial reports. We need to address them before it's too late." His expression shifted, a flicker of concern crossing his features. "Irregularities? What do you mean?" Emily opened the folder, laying the evidence before him. "These discrepancies indicate potential fraud, Jonathan. If we don't act now, it could lead to a scandal that would affect not just you, but the entire company." Jonathan scanned the documents, his brow furrowing deeper with each page. "Where did you get this information?" he asked, his voice low. "I did the research. I connected the dots," she replied, her heart racing as she watched him. "This is serious. We need to come clean to the board and fix this." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You don't understand the implications of this, Emily. If this gets out, it could ruin everything." "Then let's prevent it from getting out," she urged, her resolve strengthening. "The right thing to do is to be transparent. You taught me that." His gaze met hers, and for a moment, she felt a glimmer of the connection they once shared. But it quickly faded as he leaned back in his chair, a calculating look in his eyes. "I'll think about it, but right now, I need to focus on the upcoming board meeting." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. It was a reminder for her doctor's appointment. She glanced at Jonathan, her heart heavy with the weight of her unspoken truth. "I have to go," she said abruptly. "I have a doctor's appointment. Is everything all right?" He looked genuinely concerned, but Emily couldn't bring herself to share the details of her condition, or the possibility that he might be the father of her child. "Not now. I'll let you know later," she said, her voice tight, and with that, she slipped out of the office, leaving Jonathan staring at the evidence she had laid before him. The elevator ride felt interminable as she descended to the lobby, her mind racing with the implications of what she had just done. She needed answers, clarity about her baby's health, and the connection to Jonathan that hung over her like a dark cloud. At the clinic, she sat in the waiting room, tapping her foot anxiously against the floor. The sterile smell of antiseptic hung in the air, mixing with the tension that coiled in her stomach. When the nurse finally called her name, she stood up, her heart pounding as she followed her into the examination room. "Emily, it's good to see you again," the doctor said, her expression warm but serious. "I know you were expecting these results. Let's go over them." Emily sat down, her palms clammy as the doctor pulled up the file on her computer. "The genetic testing revealed something unexpected," the doctor began, her tone measured. "There is a rare genetic condition that your baby may have, and it's linked to a familial trait." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean? Is it serious?" she asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "It's important to understand that this condition can be inherited. I need to ask, do you know anything about your father's family medical history?" "Not really. My mother never spoke about it much," Emily replied, confusion swirling in her mind. "Why does it matter?" The doctor paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Because based on the tests, there is a high probability that the biological father may have a connection to this condition. Have you considered who that might be?" Emily's heart raced as the pieces began to fall into place. The thought crashed over her like a tidal wave, dizzying and overwhelming. You think it could be him? I can't say for certain, but it's a possibility we need to explore. The implications of this are significant. Emily felt the world tilt beneath her. Jonathan, the man who had tormented her in that conference room, could also be the father of her child. The revelation sent her spiraling, filling her with a mix of anger, fear, and confusion. "Thank you, doctor. I need some time to process this," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. As she left the clinic, her mind was a whirlpool of thoughts. She had to confront Jonathan, but how could she even begin to explain this? And then there was the conversation she had overheard earlier. What was he hiding? The urgency of the situation pressed on her like a weight, and she felt torn between the truth of her baby and the looming corporate scandal that could ensnare them both. Standing at the intersection of her past and present, Emily realized she was at a crossroads. The choices before her felt monumental, and as she made her way back to the office, she knew that whatever lay ahead would change everything.